Good evening, this is woodblock printmaker Dave Bull here at my bench in our shop in Asakusa, Tokyo. Tonight's presentation is something completely different for us. We are going to see some printing and carving, and we are going to hear from the craftsmen themselves in their own words. So I'll be interviewing some of our team members. Not this time. The craftsman and one woman we are about to meet passed away many years ago, so we would need a time machine for that. I don't have one of those, but I have the next best thing. I have some historical footage of a printmaking workshop. An Edo-era workshop? As much as I would love to see that sort of thing, going back that far is of course not possible. But we are going back quite a long way, just around 70 years. Back in the 1950s, a production team got access to the upstairs workrooms of the Adachi company over in Mejiro here in Tokyo and filmed some of the carvers and printers at work. The footage was released at least twice back then, once as a 17-minute newsreel and portions of it later in a shorter program on French TV. What we are going to watch today is the longer newsreel version. It's of course in black and white, and parts of it were filmed under pretty poor lighting conditions. But these are small concerns. There's a huge amount of information for us here. Now, the original version had a music soundtrack blended with the narration, but to avoid trouble on YouTube, I have had to remove that. But I have transcribed the narration and the voiceovers from the craftsmen, and I will bring those to you in two ways. We will dub them as the video plays. When you hear my voice in its normal tone, as now, this will represent the voice of the narrator. When you hear my voice altered this way, that will be the translated words of the particular craftsman we are watching. I will also add the same narration as subtitles, which you can view using the controls on your video player. We've prepared these in both English and Japanese. I will also add, I think, small titles here and there identifying the people we see, the ones that I can identify. Now I know, because we have experience showing this footage on our Twitch stream, I know that there will be questions, many questions. So here's the drill. We will first just watch this straight through with the narrations. I will then rewind, as it were, and replay a few places here and there where I'm able to add additional information or exposition. For those of us working in this field today, this footage is hugely interesting. It was taken when I was only a small child, and by the time I got to Tokyo to try and get started as a printmaker, most of these people were gone. I knew them only through stories shared by other craftsmen, and of course I saw the results of their work. I did meet two of the people we will see, as I will mention during the replay section. I guess that this presentation will mostly be of interest to those of us actually working in this field, but I hope it might have a wider appeal as well. Let's have a look at it. Ukiyo-e, the art of the common people, was born in the Edo period and was loved by the townspeople who sought a more humane life under the oppression of feudalism. The bookshops where illustrated books were sold were bustling with townspeople. In this image, ukiyo-e craftsmen are parodied as women. A publisher inspects a design submitted by an artist. The feeling of ukiyo-e could be expressed in woodblock prints through the carver's skill with his knives. It is said that a single baron was all that was needed for a printer to ply his trade anywhere. With the cooperation of these highly skilled carvers and printers, publishers were able to produce vivid ukiyo-e works. These reproductions affect us now just as deeply as ukiyo-e of the Edo period. Contemporary publisher Mr. Adachi is constantly visited by ukiyo-e enthusiasts and researchers. Mr. Adachi has been working hard, focusing on early ukiyo-e to publish prints that will become documentary material for future generations. His reproductions convey the life of the originals. The printer's workshop is on the second floor. Adachi-san comes up only occasionally, giving direction to the printers to produce his desired results. Using the techniques of the Edo period, 5 printers work here, 8 hours a day. Murata-san, with 40 years of experience as a printer. He said that it takes 10 years to become a full-fledged printer, even for this seemingly simple job of applying pigment to blocks and taking impressions with the baron. To make a reprint, the original is photographed onto photosensitive Mino paper, then pasted onto a black-coated block. With the Mino paper peeled off, the block is passed to the carver. This is a work from Utamaro's mature period entitled Minami-eki Hajirushi. The carver Okura-san is acclaimed as one of the top carvers of ukiyo-e in Japan. He begins by carving the block for the very important black outlines. Okura-san is designated as an intangible cultural asset for his carving. The lines drawn by Utamaro, who is said to have created the best depictions of women in the Edo period, are carved by Okura-san to match exactly the lines cut by the carvers of the old days. The carving of the face requires the most skill. The eyes, which determine the facial expression, are particularly difficult, and the slightest movement of the blade can alter the facial expression. When you carve the eyes, you have to hold your breath. I can't blink. It has to be done in a single movement, a quick single movement. It's challenging. It is said that no matter how skillful one is at using the carving knives, it does not necessarily mean that one can carve a face. Perhaps as few as 1 out of 10. Among the carver's work, it is hair carving that requires the most precise and detailed skills. With carving like this, it's important to cut the hair working with the wood grain. If you go against the grain, it's so thin it would chip or break. You have to study the grain, find the best place to start, and the best direction from which to work. Okura-san can cut 3 hairs in a millimeter. The hands of a man in his 70s, which might tremble somewhat when holding a sake cup, will move as he pleases when holding the knife. Okura-san saves the hair carving for when his body is in best condition. Once outlines are cut, the next step is to remove the unneeded waste wood. Okura-san, working for 60 years, is the 3rd generation of a family of carvers dating back to the end of the Edo period. He started to learn the craft at the age of 14. Usually, people do a lot of practice carving. In my case, though, I had always enjoyed drawing, sketching all the time. So when I started, I only ended up doing 1 half-size block before beginning normal work. My family lived on a street called Kyuyasubashi-dori, and I could have earned plenty in the family business. This life has been tough, but anyway, I've managed to make it this far. The last step uses the aiski chisels to shave off the last portions of unwanted wood. At this stage, you can't direct the tool towards the line. If you direct the tool away from the line, you will be safe. It generally takes from 1 week to 10 days to cut one key block. In the early days of printmaking, all the prints were sumizuri, in which only a single black was used. This is a work by Ishikawa Shigenobu, one of the earliest ukiyo-e designers. Following that came the tan-e genre, in which a red color was applied by hand. And then beni, yellow, green, and other colors began to be hand-painted with brushes. Following the introduction of prints created with two colors, red and green, came the Harunobu fully multicolor designs, leading to the creation of many masterpieces. Utamaru richly expressed the beauty of women. With exquisite carving and printing, Hiroshige's images demonstrated a new mood in landscapes. Hokusai also broke new ground in his depiction of nature as seen through the eyes of the people, and left behind works that are still inspiring today. Mr. Funabashi creates the block designs on behalf of the Edo painters. Referring to a copy of the original, he breaks down the image into as many color blocks as will be required. For each pattern of the kimono, matching the original exactly, he fills in the required shape with a vermilion tint. Mr. Funabashi is one of only a few people able to separate the colors from the original design to create these tracings for the carver. The tracings thus created are pasted onto woodblocks and the colored areas are carved. When the color areas have enough separation, 2 or 3 can be cut onto a single block. For this image, there will be 4 blocks. The hairpin, lips, patterns on the towel, the kimono pattern, the background, and the dark black hair. The tracings are given to Okura-san. They are pasted onto the woodblocks, and the back face of each is rubbed off by hand, leaving only the image on the surface. It is difficult to manage the application of the paste and the amount of rubbing. The paper must not peel off completely, and the image must be visible enough to allow easy carving. The color blocks, the black key block, they all have to be considered together. If you don't do that, you'll never get a good result. If the color blocks aren't done well, the key block would be useless. Okura-san works to his own satisfaction without regard to business affairs. He always carves not only ukiyo-e but also contemporary images or whatever else he is asked to do. The color blocks are made from the same cherrywood planks as those used for the outlines, but somewhat softer. These blocks are carved using both sides, and if the quality of the wood is substandard, they may become distorted. Three other carvers work together with Okura-san. Living alone in her old age, this is Okura-san's younger sister. She's pretty dexterous. I still remember when she came to the workplace being naughty. As for the work, she's pretty good and also fast. She's as good as the men. She has also carved complex Hiroshige designs. Next to her, his sons are working with carving tools. Okura-san's son went off to war for a long time. When he came home, he still had a memory of the work and was able to pick it up fairly quickly. I'm sure he will be able to handle things when I'm gone. As long as I am still here, when something difficult comes, I still rely on them a little. This is the younger brother of my daughter-in-law. He also seems to like the work. I like this. I like all the parts of the work. The carving, the hammering, and the clearing. It's an unusual business. It takes nearly a month to carve the key block and set of color blocks for a typical ukiyo-e print. After the wood blocks are carved, they are carefully examined before being handed over to the printer. Since Okura-san has had experience both drawing and printing since he was young, he takes care to carve the wood blocks so that they will be easy to print and will not be damaged by the printing brushes. In the past, as much of his work was burned after the earthquake and lost during the war, he would like to continue working in order to carve and leave better ones. On Japanese paper to be used for ukiyo-e, sizing, a mixture of alum and hide glue, is applied to prevent the pigments from bleeding. Murata-san, the printer, moves the baron as though in reply to the sharpness of the carver's knife. Black pigment is applied to the woodblocks carved by Okura-san. Murata-san has worked on a variety of woodblock prints since he was 16 years old, but he's been more concerned with creating harmony in his work than just printing colors. I put emphasis on the face first and foremost, trying to make the face look soft and to make sure the fine hairs are done well. Pigment is then applied to the pattern on the hand towel. For this kind of beauty print, the outlines are usually printed first, and the rest are layered on, starting with the lightest color. The colors are neatly placed within the black lines by skillful technique. Long experience is key to mixing the pigments. You can't just say, well, that's that. In the end, it's simply a matter of having a long-standing knack for getting just the right amount of color. The paper used is pure Hosho washi, specially made in Fukui Echizen. To finish off, the hair is finished with rich, deep black pigment. After the print is finished, the artist examines the harmony of the entire painting, focusing on the face. It is the role of the printer to express the artist's intentions in the print. This is how the art of the townspeople born in Edo once again entertains many people. The advanced woodblock printing techniques perfected in the Edo period have been preserved and handed down by these master carvers and printers. For the introduction to their video, the producers chose to use some old ukiyo-e prints depicting craftsmen at work. I kind of wish they hadn't done this, because these particular images have caused me no end of grief down the years. Dave, you said that making woodblock prints was mostly men's work back in the old days, but these old prints are documentary evidence that women did it. Well, sorry, but no. These are parodies. Absolutely nobody back in the day would have been interested in real images from a printing workroom, a bunch of guys hunched over their benches. And I think it should be obvious that long flowing kimono, special high fashion hairdos, these things have absolutely no place in a busy workroom. Here's a photo from the summer of 1951, taken a few months before I was born. It's from a magazine story about ukiyo-e researcher Richard Lane, now no longer with us. They have plopped him in front of a printer's bench, but it is clear from the way that he is clumsily holding the baron that he wasn't actually working there. This was just a photo shoot. It's a bit hard to tell in the photo, but I think the man in front of him, who clearly does know what he is doing, is pretty amused by the whole thing. And no, please don't jump to conclusions. This tattoo gives us no indication that this guy is a Yakuza member. Back in this era, it was very common for workers in rough trades, construction, trucking, and yes, woodblock printing, to have this kind of body decoration. I mentioned in my introduction that I met two of the men in this video, and here is the first of them. This is Isamu Adachi, who was adopted into the family in order to take over the business when the founder Toyohisa Adachi retired. Many people, myself included, are very curious about exactly what he is doing in this segment. Now we know what is going on. He is transferring an image to a blank block ready for the carver. But I have not been able to clearly ascertain the step-by-step procedure here. We understand that it's a variation on the old colotype process. It clearly involves photography from an original source, and the narration describes using washi that has been photosensitized. But this pasting onto a black-coated block, then peeling off, is difficult to understand. I'm also sorry to report that I've left it too late to find out from Adachi-san himself. I contacted the Adachi company the other day to see if I could get a chance to chat with him for this video, but was gently rebuffed. He's now 94 years old, and although he maintains the title of chairman of the organization, all operations are now handled by managers and staff, and he's no longer available for communication. This one is fun. Look at the two leftmost chisels. They differ in two ways. The one on the left makes a wider cut than the other, and that one is also considerably shorter. Here's a photo of my own matching chisel. And let me fool around a little bit in Photoshop to adjust my chisel to make it match one that I saw one day in the toolbox of Ito Susumu, the carver who appeared in my Remembering a Carver video some years back. When I first saw that strange shaped chisel, I asked him about the shape. Why does it look like a hammerhead shark? Well, you can imagine his reply. It's actually kind of obvious now. As the years go by, cutting and sharpening, these chisels, of course, get shorter and shorter. The shorter one on Okura-san's bench has simply been sharpened a lot more. He was in his 70s at the time this video was made, and he passed away, I think, in his 80th year. I guess maybe this was his last chisel, perhaps. Now, something going on here is a bit difficult to see in the video. Okura-san himself and his son were both working on blocks of the oban size, which cover a large area of the workbench and which provide stable support for one's hands while carving. But the other two people here are working on much smaller pieces of wood. Now, in this case, it's difficult to manage the position of your hands, so it's common to use this device, known as a hasami ita, when working on small pieces. The block to be carved is held in position by little shims that jam it into place. If we freeze a scene from the part of the video where Okura-san's son is carving, that's the other person that I met on a number of occasions, we can see something interesting on his woodblock. A separate piece of wood, slightly narrower than the thickness of the main block, has been attached to it with 5 nails. This is a hashibame, and the idea is to provide stiffness across the grain to avoid warping of the block. There's one at each end, and these will stay there indefinitely right through the printing stages. They are, of course, slightly thinner than the main block in order that they do not interfere with the printer's baron as it passes overhead. We don't see these on the block set that Okura-san himself carved in this video. Perhaps the wood was very strong and stable, or perhaps they chose to leave them off for this presentation. Here are photos from some blocks that I myself carved a number of years ago, showing them more clearly. I might also mention that if we could jump back in time to the pre-war period and show these photos and video to one of the craftsmen preparing the wood blocks back then, they would be very upset with all of us. Nails? Unbearable! Your main block will one day split at those places. These hashibame have to be mortised into place. What's the world coming to these days? This is Isamu-san again, and once more we are somewhat puzzled by what he is doing. The work itself is clear. He is coating the printing paper with a sizing mixture. This is dosa in Japanese. But this is almost certainly a session posed for the camera. For one thing, the amount of liquid needed to size the volume of paper we see in the room is far greater than what could be contained in that little tray. And the tray is not heated at all, something impossible in our own sizing experience, where the liquid must be kept warmed in order to allow it to flow smoothly into the paper. Now, going by everybody's clothing, this film was made in summer, and perhaps he's working with such a weak mixture that it remains runny at room temperature. This is possible, as he is brushing it on with repeated passes, something we have been unable to do successfully, finding that this method leaves streaks in the paper. Let's freeze frame here for a second and look at some of Murata-san's tools. We can see 2 different kinds of brushes. The group hanging on the wall behind him with vertical handles are known as hangabake. The ones on the workbench in front of him, shaped more like a shoe brush, are called marubake. If we skip back to one of the old prints we saw in the introduction, we see only the hangabake type. That's all they had back then, as the marubake were not developed until sometime in the late Meiji period. These marubake are basically all that we printers use these days, except for the times when we are applying pigment to very small areas. The advantages of the older type must have been so great that everybody made the changeover, but it is still a bit curious to me that none of us these days use them in their larger form. It's something on my list of things to explore one day. Okay, I think that's about all I can pick from that video just now. As much as I wish they had shown us more detail, I'm very happy to have had this chance to watch these 2-minute work. A few points. I actually have more video of the same 2 guys working, filmed just a few years after the one we have just watched. And I also have some good footage of the papermaking process over in the Iwano workshop from this same era. So this series, Blast from the Past, will continue as I get time for the editing. Now that we've seen Adachi's craftsmen at work, let's finish by looking over some prints they made. Down in the depths of my personal collection, I have a group of prints that were sold in the gift shop at the National Museum in Ueno Park here in Tokyo. They are marked as being published by the museum itself and dated in the late 1940s. Toyohisa Adachi is credited as the kantoku, the word we usually use for the person who directs a movie, but which here presumably indicates production supervisor. It also carries the names of a number of the men who worked under him, including the 2 men we have just seen. I unfortunately don't have the same exact print we saw in the video, but the ones I do have are very much from the same time and place. They are, as you might expect, very nicely produced and a pleasure to peruse. That's all for now. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.